But let's move to this now. And foot and mouth disease has taken hold in 116 different areas, we understand, in 6 provinces. The Agriculture Ministry has taken the decision now to ban all movement of cattle in the country for the next 3 weeks. This in an effort to curb the outbreak. Well, I'm joined now by Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development Minister Thoko Didiza. Minister, thank you very much for joining us. Just give me a sense of how this ban, which is pretty draconian, is going to affect the cattle industry, both internally and in terms of export sales.
Well, thank you very much, Sally, and your listeners. It is indeed important for us to indicate that one of the important interventions that we're making are to save the industry, both in the short, medium, and the long run. As you know, that we've been battling this disease. We've tried to contain it in areas such as Limpopo, in areas such as KwaZulu-Natal. We then had a spread in one of the feedlots in Northwest, which also had a subsidiary feedlot in Makwad in the Free State, where we also picked up this disease. We tried to quarantine and contain. Unfortunately, it has actually gone even further. In Makwad, for instance, in the Free State, we've got more farms around the feedlot area that have also been affected. We've also picked up in Bethlehem another incident. What this has meant is that it is important for us to take harsher measures to contain the disease, because if we do not take such a decision, we will actually affect the entirety of the livestock industry, not just cattle, but as you know that because of the early infections of foot and mouth, it has actually affected the wool growers. So it's important for us, as well as the industry, to act with speed. What the measures mean...
Sorry, continue. Yes.
Okay. We have actually put a ban for 21 days, which will be reviewable every week as we see, how we are managing this disease, and we'll be able to release those areas that clearly, are not affected. So we will be putting all our resources as the agricultural sector with all the provinces to make sure that we monitor clearly. We've agreed that you already have animals that are in the auctions as we speak. So we're giving a 48-hour for sales to happen and permits to be given as people take their animals from the auctions to their destination, so that we can account for who has taken animals and we can be able to actually track and trace. We've also acknowledged that there are other animals that are there in the shows where people are using them for shows, and we said those will continue. We know some of our feedlotters import their animals from Namibia and Botswana. And again, we've given a 48-hour window period for those movements under strict protocols to make sure that we do not actually impact negatively where such transactions have already been undertaken.
I want to ask you a quick question about the severity of this outbreak. Is it our worst outbreak ever?
Actually, at the moment, it is our worst outbreak because as we speak, we've got about 116 facilities that have been affected. Some of those are farms, some of those are feedlots, and in some communal areas. And it's in the provinces of KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo, Northwest, Gauteng, Mpumalanga, and Free State. So you can see the scale in terms of the infections, how far it has gone in these other provinces, which really require us to act and act with speed.
Right, I understand that. Who's to blame then? Because you say it's the worst outbreak ever. Who hasn't done their job? I noticed that your press release points to the illegal movement of animals as well.
Yes.
Is that the main reason, or are people going to have to answer for this?
Well, obviously, there are some leads that were undertaken where we really think there was a deliberate break of biosecurity, and those are going to be dealt with in terms of our Animal Disease Act. But we also are saying it is important that people, not only just the movement of cattle, but the management of the trucks and vehicles that they're using, so that at every point those are cleaned and decontaminated, because themselves they can be the spread of the disease.
We've seen in other countries, and I think this happened in the UK a few years ago, that there was a decision taken to slaughter animals on any farm, for example, that had foot and mouth. What is the situation here in South Africa? Are these animals all going to have to be slaughtered? If so, how many? What happens to the meat that would have been destined for export? Does it just all have to be destroyed, or can it still be eaten?
Let me say that with regards to foot and mouth, you vaccinate so that you reduce the virulence of the virus to clear, and then you slaughter, but you actually make sure that in the meat you debone it, because you can find it in the marrow. You remove the fifth quarter, which is your head and the upper part of the animal, and make sure that the meat that is then eaten is safe. So we make sure that, particularly in those farms, we immediately put them under quarantine, we vaccinate, and make sure that when they go to slaughter, there are particular protocols that must be followed.
We've also seen that as soon as there's any sort of veterinary health problem in South Africa, that we see countries, for example, in the EU, they tend to impose bans on us. Is our meat banned from export at this point?
Let me say that, one of the obligations that all of the countries have as members of the International Organization on Animal Health, immediately you pick up an animal disease, you have to report to the OIE. And the OIE has a responsibility to inform all member states. And what has always been a practice is that a majority of member states will actually take, precautions by banning products from that country. They will engage with the country to see what measures are you putting in place in addressing the problem. And they would actually, given the confidence that they have on your ability to manage this problem, they may actually allow in compartmentalized areas to still import where they are assured that this area is free of disease. That is why you are saying on a weekly basis, we will be reviewing and communicating with our citizens and our industry how to move forward.
Do we export our beef?
Yes, we do export our beef.
And have any of those exports been stopped since this outbreak?
Yes, some of those exports actually has been stopped
and
as a result of this outbreak. And we have been in communication. I'm sure you might have heard in the past 2 weeks, the Wool Growers Association raising a similar concern in respect of their wool to China, where they are exporting to, where there was a ban as a result of this outbreak. So we've been engaging the Chinese government to actually allow the export of wool to China, because the parts of our wool growing in the Eastern Cape has not been affected by foot and mouth. And in our view, they should then be allowed to actually export. That is why we are working with the industry to make sure that we protect our country from, such outbreaks, and really appeal to our citizens, both farmers and those who may be small animal holders in the villages, to really abide by these protocols. I must commend the Limpopo province, particularly where we work with traditional leaders to communicate with communal farmers, and we've been able to manage the problem in Limpopo, for instance. We've had certain problems in other provinces, and we're actually upping our game in making sure that we buttress this problem.
It's interesting that you've banned the movement of cattle for 21 days. You're going to review it on a weekly basis, obviously hoping to contain these 116 different outbreak sites. You haven't banned the movement of other cloven-hooved animals. And what I picked up from your release is it's quite pragmatic, because you're basically saying it would just be too devastating. So it's not as prevalent in those other with other cloven-hooved animals such as sheep, goats, pigs, and some game. But I would imagine, am I right, that if you don't contain this now, we could see a more devastating and widespread ban across other cloven-hooved animals. Am I right?
Precisely. That is why we want to make sure that with this pragmatic approach, everybody concerned must take responsibility. Because remember, biosecurity is not just the responsibility of government alone. It's also for each and every farmer, it's each and every feedlot, it's each and every auctioneer, because all of us must be alive to the potential of any animal outbreak. And therefore, we must comply with the necessary regulations that are there, not only in this instance, but going forward. It should be our practice that we are actually vigilant as producers, as feedlotters, as auctioneers, to make sure that we protect this industry.
Yeah, and you've referenced the illegal movement of cattle as being part of the problem spreading this disease. But how much capacity do you have to actually monitor the movement of cattle? We know that stock theft, for example, is quite rife in certain areas. So how much are you able to monitor and control?
We do have animal technicians as well as veterinary officials who are working with us, but also working with farmers, we actually indicate to them that when you see certain clinical signs in your animal that it's not well, immediately take action and report to your closest veterinary service so that we can be able to deal with the problem. We also are working with the law enforcement agency, particularly in monitoring movement control, working with our officials so that we are able to deal with the challenge. We're also allowing permitting system, as I say, that in this 48 window period, already some animals are already in the auction points. So you can't say those animals must not be sold. But we're saying, as people move from those auctions, we will give them permits so that we can know that you have got Thoko Didiza who bought 10 animals, who's going to Waterberg. At least you know exactly which farm you can track and trace immediately if there's a problem.
Do those animals get tested at the auction before they move into a new area, though?
Yes, you do look at the clinical signs. Actually, auctioneers have been doing that as we speak, that when animals come, they actually look at the animal's clinical signs. If they see that the animal has a problem, they actually reject it. They don't accept it.
Right. What sort of punishment do people who break the cattle lockdown face? How severe is it?
Well, it is severe because that's a commercial crime. You're actually affecting the economy if you actually break the rule, because livestock industry, you know, it contributes to our economy, and therefore the penalties are very high, but obviously the determination is for the magistrate concerned to actually give the penalty that is due in relation to the crime committed.
Has anyone been found potentially guilty of doing this and spreading the disease, or are you still investigating?
Well, at the moment, we are actually investigating. There are certain leads that we are following in terms of what has happened, why we had such spread in particular areas, where was the origin of the animal that had been impacted upon, and why did the owner not inform the officials concerned, and where there was a movement deliberately of animals where owners of those facilities knew that there was a problem and not reported them. So we are following and investigating. But obviously, once we are clear, we will be able to appraise yourselves and any other people who may be interested on the matter.
Yeah, and I'm sure in the meantime it's about containing the outbreak and finding the culprits at a later stage. Thank you so much, Minister. A really important issue that, of course, is our agriculture, land reform and rural development. Minister Thoko Didiza talking to us about the outbreak of foot and mouth. It's in 116 areas across 6 provinces here in South Africa. It seems that our beef exports have been temporarily banned by some countries, so it's going to have an impact on agriculture. After 7 o'clock, we'll be speaking to the Red Meat Association about how they are feeling the effects.